Hey everybody, my name is Kylie Davila, and I'm going to be going over chapters 11, 12, and 13 in the book Worthy. And this is going to wrap up the section of unlearning, which is all about the lies. And so I'm just going to jump right in with chapter 11. And the lie is, I'm an imposter and not enough on my own. And she opens it with a really good quote from Erwin McManus, I would assume you would pronounce his name. And it says, whatever you fear establishes the boundaries of your freedom. And I think that is such a good quote and such a good reminder, because we're always going to have that boundary around, whatever our fears are, that's going to be like what holds us in from freedom in any area of life. It doesn't matter if it's the business, mom, friendship, whatever. And I think fear, it shows up in so many ways. And even with my son Noah, like, we're going through a big phase right now where at nighttime he's really scared. And like last night it was so bad, after like the third time of whatever he was scared of, me and Julio both were in his room. And the verse, like 2 Timothy 1:7, I think is the verse. But I was telling him, I was like, hey, pray about it. You have authority over anything in your mind. Because what got me thinking about it, he was like, well, I have all these thoughts, and I can't help it. And I was like, actually, you can. And I was like, the Lord says, like, he doesn't give you a spirit of fear. He gives you a spirit of power and of sound mind. And I was like, you have the ability, any of those thoughts in your head, you can just wipe them away. Like, say a prayer, replace them, and know that any of the fear that you have, that is not from God. And so, just speak these truths. Like, it came to me. And so when I was going over this the other day, and then today, my notes, I was like, I was telling Noah this last night. And sometimes you just need to like see it from the outside looking in. And so I thought that was really good. And she goes into imposter syndrome. And I had never heard this term until I started Plexus and somebody else was talking about their experience and like, oh my gosh, I am having imposter syndrome. And so I definitely experienced this in my life. I just had never heard the term until, I don't know how many years ago it was, but imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that our success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of our own efforts or skills. So we're always kind of like downplaying ourselves, or we just don't feel worthy of it. And she says that 75% of women in executive roles have experienced imposter syndrome. And what she says is the remedy to this is learning to trust yourself. And I thought it was very interesting that I had this chapter, because I struggle so much with trusting myself. I have my whole life. I'm not assertive. I'm always second guessing. I am always like, I'm going to ask so-and-so. I'm going to ask because it makes me feel more confident in my decision and moving forward. And it's not bad to like get others' opinions and stuff, but it's that knowing of, hey, the Lord did create you, and you have your own mind, you have your own thoughts, you have your own creativity and all of that. And you can own that. Like, you can be confident in who God has called you to be and showing up. And the world needs your authentic self. Like, you're the only you in the world. And so by you like owning up to that and being more confident, and I am a work in progress, y'all. I've come so far, but like when the more success I've reached, the more confident I am that other people can do this, because they do not know the depth of insecurity and doubt and everything that I have faced since I was little. And so I'm like, if I can do this, literally you can do this too. So I hope you guys believe that. But to clarify, so wanting companionship, connection, and belonging is different from feeling we need someone else to be whole or to have love in our lives. So it is not wrong to want companionship, connection, or belonging. It's just when you feel like you need that other person to validate you or to feel whole or to have the love, that's where it's wrong. And so learning to trust yourself, once you learn to trust yourself and own your intuition, you'll no longer feel like an imposter. And for me personally, it has been a big spiritual journey for me. Like, I feel like in my life, looking back, because I was really reflecting on this, I feel like when I have been more distant with like the Lord and like not in his word and what God says about me and my identity and stuff, that's where I start to like question myself more and my insecurities get louder and all of that. But when I'm like really close to the Lord and like in his word, that's where you're going to get discernment and wisdom and all that. You can like pray for it. And some of the verses that I wrote down that have helped me personally is Proverbs 2:10, for wisdom will come into your heart and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. And Proverbs 2:6, for the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. And so those are just some like truths and biblical scriptures that you can write down to pray, like if you struggle with this also, because that's me. And she says, developing intuition and learning to get still enough to hear your own knowing are skills we spend our entire lives building. Like muscles, these abilities get stronger and have more muscle memory with every use. So knowing that this is not overnight, like you're going to have to just start owning your story, stepping into it. And if you get it wrong, she says that's okay. It's just part of failing forward, right? You learn from it, you get better from it. And so I thought that was really good too, knowing that, hey, this isn't overnight and you're not going to just get it in one day or 1 week. This is like a lifetime thing that you're building up. So I'm going to go to chapter 12. Well, I'll end it with this. So at the very end of the chapter, she says, your knowing is the ticket. Cultivate it. Your hard work and resilience are the path. Brave it. Your soul is the magical room. Inhabit and it. Trust it. You don't need a VIP ticket when you realize you are the VIP. And I thought that was so good. So chapter 12, the lie, if I'm me, I won't be loved. And again, she starts out with this amazing quote from Brene Brown. And I think this was in her book that we did years ago for book club. But you either walk into your story and own your truth, or you live outside of your story hustling for your worthiness. And how she defines being authentic is true to one's own personality, spirit, or character, not false. And so what's kind of crazy about this, ironic about this, is that usually when we're putting on like a false identity, or we're like really wanting to belong or fit in, so we're like not showing up as us, it's because we're like seeking to fully feel that connection and belonging and love. But ultimately, she says we cannot experience true love if we're not showing up as our true, authentic self. So that's the irony behind it. And she says most research shows inauthentic and even perfectionistic behaviors develop in childhood when we learn to disregard our own wants and needs and become devoted to meeting the expectations and needs of others in order to gain the feeling of belonging. And I can definitely think back to elementary school. I have memories. I remember everything. Like my husband thinks I'm so weird because I have memories from like when I was little. I can remember a lot of stuff, but you always remember feelings, right? Can you guys always go back to like times, like those really high emotions, especially, I hate it, but like those ones that feel really icky, you can go back and you can remember exactly how that person made you feel. And so I can remember, back in elementary school, learning to like fit in with the girls because girls can be so not nice. And I remember the first time I realized like, oh, these two girls are having a sleepover and now I'm kind of on the outs. Oh, I guess I need to like, I want to feel like I belong, and having to like play into whatever. And so I remember that. And even I can say that's true for when I got married, moved away from my hometown and became a military spouse, wanting to fit in with the women. And you meet such different personalities and backgrounds in the military, like when you're moving all over. And it was a very big, rude awakening for me. But I remember one of the first times meeting someone, we went to somebody's house, and I remember I was just me, and I was telling this girl, she is so nice. I thought she was going to be like my best friend. And I was like, oh my gosh, the Lord has really like blessed us. And I was telling her our story and all this. And then the next day I told my husband, I was like, oh, I didn't get her number. I should have got it. Can you ask her husband or whatever? And Julio came back the next day, was like, hey, I got her number. She said you were kind of like religious or something, but I guess that's what she told her husband. And I was like, what? I don't know. So it just made me feel like, oh, am I like turning people off? Am I this way? I got in my head about it. But ultimately, you need to show up as you. And if you turn some people away, that's okay. You're going to attract the people you're meant to attract. Like those are your people. And so being okay with that, because that was a really hard adjustment. And just remember that feeling true love and belonging can only come from being loved for who you truly are. And if you show up as anything else, it's going to be unfulfilling and you're always going to feel like something's missing. And to kind of wrap up that chapter, she talks about her friend Edward and being at that retreat, and what they didn't know who he was. He was some crazy editor-in-chief of like the most popular magazine somewhere, whatever. Had they known this, they probably wouldn't have showed up as their authentic self. But because there was no pretenses, no fears, no striving for some kind of acceptance, they were able to bond as their true selves, and they created a deep, lasting friendship. And she said that that was the gift, was getting to truly know him, Edward, at a soul level. And so I thought that was so good, and something to remember. So the path to love and connection is to reveal the real. And chapter 13, which was my favorite, I felt like I should have asked Tova, because I feel like in the Army you have acronyms and then you just pronounce the acronym. So I wanted to say RAS. Can you say RAS, or do you have to say RAS? I feel like Tova, you gotta like type that in the comments because I don't know what's correct. But your reticular activating system was very fascinating in this chapter. So the lie is labels are permanent. Labels are things that we have from childhood that people have put on us, even if it wasn't meant to be malicious or mean or anything. Like, you know, people joke around. Something that people used to tell me when I was little was, you're so ditzy. Oh my gosh, you're such a blonde. You're so ditzy. Like I got told that all the time by my family. And they didn't mean it in a bad way, but like, just being mindful of labels that you've had since childhood or growing up, or even the labels that you put on yourself. And so the reason that this RAS, the reticular activating system, is important is because our mind is looking for those thoughts that we have. They want to reinforce it. So basically it's a giant filter. It's filtering out 99% of stimuli around you so you can focus on what's important. And then also like those beliefs that are coming through, those thoughts, they can take root and become part of our identity. And so that's why it's so important that we're taking every thought captive. And so let's say she uses the example, if you were to say like a label you put on yourself was, I'm just not very smart. Like that's the thought that came across. You didn't change it. You didn't take it captive. You didn't like replace it. You just are like, man, I'm just really not very smart. Your mind, your RAS, is going to go out and start to look at ways to reinforce that belief. Every time you screw up, every time you miscalculate, every time you mess up, it's going to be like, see, you're right. You're not very smart. Oh, yeah, that's why you're not very smart right there. Like, you're so right. You're not very smart. And then that becomes part of your identity. And so it's very important to be aware of this. So she says, before we know it, these negative labels become deep-rooted beliefs, and with enough repetition, those deep-rooted beliefs or labels become part of our identity. What we focus on multiplies. We become what we believe. So while this can be negative, it can also be very powerful and very positive, because now that you know this, you can bring awareness to any disempowering labels, which she has the whole chart in the book. Any disempowering label you have, write it down. She goes into deep stuff about like, what has this cost you? You know, what has this prevented you from seeking? Just like deep thoughts. What has this label kept you from achieving in life? And then you're taking those disempowering things and you're replacing it with the truth or an empowering belief, because the same thing can happen. Like when a positive thought comes in, your mind is going to look to reinforce it. Your reticular activating system, and if it's correct, your RAS. I just want to call it RAS. I don't know if that's right or not, but So labels are powerful, and when we believe the empowering ones, they can help us positively shape our identity and self-worth. And to kind of wrap up chapter 13, she talks about Ed Milet. I've never heard that story, but I've followed him for a long time, and I thought that was so good. He believes that the teacher, had orchestrated this thing for someone to come in, but all because of something spoken over him. It changed the course of his life because it was a thought that came in, and he chose to keep that thought, and then it took root, became part of his identity, and it was probably one of the changing moments, like changed the trajectory of his life, and now he's leading like millions and millions of people. And I love what he said, or she shared, that he does with his kids, and that he's very mindful of the words he speaks over them, and he will say, let me tell you about you, and then he tells each one empowering statements that will help with their identity and their self-worth and their confidence. And I thought that was so beautiful. So that's where I'm going to kind of wrap up the 3 chapters and open it for you guys. Whatever stood out, what was your favorite chapter? What were your biggest takeaways? I'll just open it up for you guys to share.
I think it's really funny. I did the little activity that she had in the book about like the labels and whatever. And my top one, I don't know if you've read the chat yet, Kylie, but my top one about like the disempowering was that everyone calls me aggressive. And whenever you were talking about the girl calling you too religious or whatever, I was like, let me find this girl with a fist emoji. But like, I'm just really passionate, like with things I care about, people I care about. And, for the longest time, like everyone calls me aggressive. And I'm like, no, y'all, like I just care about stuff. It's not aggression. It's just me like being super passionate about things. And for the longest time, I would like hold back who I truly was because I didn't want to intimidate anyone or make people feel uncomfortable. But it's just passion. And if I do need to find that girl, I will,
So was that your change? Was your disempowering being called aggressive, but you changed it, like your new statement is passionate?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that's amazing.
I think that's so good. And I'm so proud of you for writing it down, because I think that makes a huge difference too. And not that boys aren't, but I think it's worse with women are labeled certain things by other women or teachers or whatever. And I think it's important and helpful to look back at what have you been told about your personality your whole life and shifted, even if you're so quiet and shy. Maybe you're a really good listener. Like just slight tweaks where maybe is viewed as a weakness when in fact it's your superpower, and it usually is. Not that we can't do better on it, but chapter 13, I love that chapter. And I've done other talks on, you call it RAS. If you want to call it RAS, you call it that, Kylie. But there was one book we read, I can't remember which one, but it talked about the guy in high school who got the SAT results, and he had done really bad in high school and got his SAT results, and they were like 1,500, whatever, 1,450. He did amazing. He did good. And so he's like, maybe I'm not like a loser and dumb. Like maybe I should start considering. And he went off to start these huge companies. And eventually 10 years later, I think came back to him that his results had been inverted with someone else. Their like social security numbers were close together, and he did terrible on his SATs. But someone told that guy, no, you're smart. And it was a total like lie, but he believed it in essence. So I think it's the same thing chapter 13 says. You have to tell yourself what you want to believe, what you want to become, and you'll become it. And my mom always said that about kids, like they'll become what you tell them they are. And it hasn't changed, you guys. It's the same with you. I'm bad with people. You're gonna be. I'm a terrible recruiter. You're gonna be. Like, stop speaking those things unless you want them to happen. So that's my little sermon for the night.
I agree with the labels. They suck, but at times they're a blessing. So I feel like what you pour into somebody from an early age, a child, um, they will become that. They will believe that. They will develop self-worth and self-esteem and all these other great things because they've they know nothing else. They're like sponges. So if you pour greatness into them, they're going to grow up to be great 9 out of the 10 times. And if you pour not so much into them, then, unfortunately, they don't aspire to much. They kind of think this is culturally my norm. Look around me. This is where I belong. And it's so wrong. And I speak that from like my teaching point of view, especially because I work with children in a very bad community. And so I've had kids graduate and come to me and say, thank you because of you. Like, you're the only person that's actually um you're the only person that's actually believed in me. And so thank you for that. Okay, I'm done.
I love that. So
Wait,
this chapter reminds me a bit about, I know Fallon's not on here because she's like halfway home or something, but I know for the longest time she thought she didn't like people because as kids, that's, what she was told because maybe she didn't, I don't know, or maybe she was just shy, but I know that was something big that she overcame in her business just because she had told herself that for so long and believed that she really just didn't like people because she's an introvert. So I know that was like really big for her. And so just knowing that, and I just love these chapters because I think one of my favorite quotes is goes something like this though, like be yourself so the people looking for you can find you. Like I love the running theme of that in this book because it's so true. And like, why would you want to be someone else and people think that you're that person and you're just not yourself? Like, be yourself because people love you for that. So, I don't know. I really love that. And just the reminders, even for us parents, to call out the things we want to see in our kids instead of the negative things. And then also, even with the leaders on our team, something I love to tell my people is the things in them, like the qualities that you want to see. Like, hey, you did this. This is such a leadership skill. That is so amazing. So, really, really love using that for just like your team and building their belief because sometimes we don't feel like, making a random training for a team page is a leadership thing or whatever, taking charge of a picture and helping set people up or whatever. But it definitely can be. And some people might need to hear that more than others because they probably don't see that in themselves. So really love it.
y'all remember that movie, The Help, when it came out? There was that part where they talked about I think it was The Help. The nanny told her, you are smart, you are kind, you are special. Well, my mom and I had watched it, and she kept telling me that. And I thought, okay, you're just being funny because of the movie or whatnot. But the more you think about it, the more you appreciate it. And you don't think about it at the time until you don't hear it. So it is really good. And I think it's good that you start with children because the world is kind of crappy at times, especially depending on where you are and who's friends and stuff. See what you started, Lauren? And but I mean it's really cool though that you get that because it's not something you get everywhere.
So I feel like these chapters really hit the nail on the head and just driving home so much that I've been working on, especially like calling out kind of like the Prince Charming. I was born and raised watching Disney movies, so like that is definitely a depiction that I have set forth, like someone needs to come save me and rescue me and help bring me to a higher place. And it's like, no, like the magic and the power within me, and it's love starts here. I don't need to seek that love. And so I thought it was really cool too how you mentioned, Kylie, like just being yourself and talking to someone, and how your friend was like, oh, she's kind of religious. And as I've grown in my faith, I've learned not to shy away from speaking up about my faith or just like my beliefs, because it was easy for me to just be like, oh yeah, does that make you uncomfortable? Like, I'm not going to say anything. And so I feel like as I've grown in that aspect of my life, like I see that play out in the business part of this too, because it's easy for someone to be like, well, what do you do? And like, oh, nah, nothing. Like, and I shy away instead of just like boldly claim, like, I help people, like I change lives. And so really working on like chapter 13, that switch of how we say things and what we perceive ourselves and doing, and really taking those thoughts captive. Like I know Tova has helped me so tremendously much, being able to grow in this area. And it's becoming easier for me to like literally stop myself as I'm saying it, and I'll say out loud, I'm like, that's true. And then I'll replace it with the truth. Cause I'm like, there's so many times that I'm saying these things and I'm like, holy smokes. So I love these chapters. I feel like they're just kind of reinforcing this belief system and really driving things home. The one thing that I really loved most was she said, but I can always trust that every disappointment comes with a lesson we needed to learn or relearn to build the strength and resilience we have for where we're destined to go. And I just have to apply that to my business so much and think about that, because I feel like I should be further. I feel like I should have done more. And in reality, I'm like, really, I'm learning a lot. And if not, I'm relearning things that I know, but like, I just need that consistent thing so I can be more solid, because when I get to where I'm going, it's because of these moments. And so just having that poured into me and just like that constant reminder is just everything I always need.
Anybody else want to share? I think it's a beautiful reminder of how powerful words are. Like I think that's even a scripture, that there's power, there's life and death in the tongue and what you speak. And especially, looking at your kids, or when I'm speaking to Noah and stuff, and I'm trying to be patient and stuff, but being mindful not to call out like, oh, you're so this, or you're doing this, or you're always blah, blah, blah. But like really speaking up to him and encouraging, because it just made me realize like any of those things I speak to him, that could literally become an identity, part of his identity that he carries into adulthood. And so I want those things to be the best things.
That's so true. And I actually feel that when it comes to the labeling, we live in such a label heavy time. Their labels are getting slapped all over the place. I actually had a really hard time even saying the word autistic when it came to Liana. Like, actually, every time I write it, I'm actually like, I don't know, I'm kind of saying it for me, not really for an audience, but because I don't want that label for her. Like, I don't even want her to know that, because I don't want her to cling to that. I don't want it to become a crutch or make her feel different. I actually absolutely hate that puzzle piece symbol for autism, because I read a lot of different meanings about it. I just don't like, oh, like to fit or to like, no, it's okay that you don't. But we always tend to cling really heavy to the negative labels though. Like you could be told, you could be poured into so much over your life and be told beautiful things over you, and yet sometimes the one thing that somebody said to you that's on the negative is the one we hang on to the most. And forgive me for not remembering where this came from or what pastor spoke it, but I heard that the devil is able to hear what we speak out, but he can't read our mind. So he will use that to keep you trapped. Like, so when you say, that's why it like says, like it is powerful what you say out loud, because the enemy could hear, but he can't hear your heart or your mind. That's God. Like that's, so being mindful that even if you have those moments of weakness and you think it and you pray over it, to not say it out. And so I just thought that was just the labeling chapter really got me. That was probably the one that stood out the most to me on a lot of different levels. But just, yeah, definitely be mindful, even if you're thinking it, to not maybe say it out, because he will use that, like time and time again, and remind you. And it's like a trap of a lie.
Something else I don't think I mentioned, but when she talked about in the chapter 11, the imposter, not enough on your own, the one where she said ambitious women so often tell themselves a lie that if they just had a really great mentor in their lives, then they'd know what to do and how to do it. And basically it's like something, I used to do that a lot, like kind of cling to somebody else. Like, I don't know. Let me ask this person, or, oh man, if I had another mentor or a life coach or whatever. And I think all those things are so good to have in your life, but like, ultimately it's coming down to like believing in yourself and what the Lord is going to like give you in your mind, and being confident and moving forward with just that intuition that you have. That was another big takeaway, because I think in this business, because we do have uplines and coaching and mentoring, that sometimes we can get stuck and feel like, well, I can't do that event because, I wonder if they're going to put that event on so I can be attached to it. I wonder if they're going to do this, and like waiting. And sometimes we just need to take the initiative and just go out. And guess what? If it was a failure, you did an event, it didn't turn out good, you're going to gain some experience from it and wisdom and knowledge. But, just believing in yourself that it's okay to kind of like be the first, or to go off, or listen to your gut, or have an idea and just run with it. It's okay to do that. And like, it's good. I know we're like 4 minutes over. Anybody else have anything to add?
I know there's a whole lot I could add on to this. It's really great chapters. I know that this book is geared more towards women, but it can apply to men as well. I mean, from the labeling yourself to believing, I know that growing up, I went to private school 1st through 8th grade. And in those grades, it was always, when I first started, they were always giving trophies away for top grade point average. And I remember 1st grade, it was between me and like 2 other people for that top grade point average. And my grandmother remarried, and I always called him by his name, is Orville. And Orville thought I was the smartest person there ever was. He was always getting me to spell words and read the newspaper and do all kinds of things even before I was 5. And I remember being at their house one time and telling them that I didn't think I was going to get that trophy. And I mean, it wasn't fierce, but I mean, he got me by the arms and he told me, you can do it because you're the smartest one in that classroom. So 2 weeks later, I came home with this gigantic trophy because I ended up with the highest grade point average in that class. And it's so reiterating to me that's, what is fed into you, you believe. Because if I'd stuck with my beliefs, I would have been in 3rd place. But because of his beliefs and him pouring those into me, I ended up in 1st place. And I mean, there's just so many things. This book is great. I literally listened to these chapters on my way back and forth to work. I listened to these three times. That's how great I thought they were. And with her mentioning Erwin McManus at the start, If you ever get a chance to read his book Mind Shift, do it. It's unbelievable because it goes a lot along in line with these chapters. It's an incredible book. And, you know, as far as putting labels on yourself, I'm one that I put labels on myself. You know, I quit easy. You know, 15 years ago, I started working out, was going to 3 gyms and doing MMA and doing all this stuff and got in incredible shape. And then I quit. And then go through a divorce and I move and I do all these different things. And I keep over the years trying to get back into the gym, and it lasts a little while and it goes away. So I'll label myself as a quitter. I label myself as a failure. Now I'll give a real quick synopsis of my family on my dad's side. My grandfather was married to three women at the same time, 14 kids total. Obviously the second 2 were not legal. My grandma was the only legal one, but 14 kids. So my dad and then 13 aunts and uncles, all but 2 of them had been divorced. So I had it in my mind when I got married first time that I was going to stay married forever, do this great job, you know, break the Luton history of, you know, everybody getting divorces. 20 years later, I'm divorced. And I labeled that as a failure. But I also have to look at as opportunity and gain, because I wouldn't have this beautiful woman next to me if all of that hadn't happened. And if I had lived with that failure label and not looked into and pursued other opportunities. And sometimes when you just sit back and let things roll, whether it's with business or with personal life or with your kids or with your job, sometimes if you let go of those reins and stop that control freak that we all like to be, especially me, things can fall into place.
That's so good. And it is geared more towards women, like she said, but there's so much in there that like I've shared with my husband, and it's just so beneficial to every single person because she hits all the nails on the head, I think, with all the stuff that she mentions. So I have very much enjoyed all of y'all's takeaways. I think everybody had so much knowledge, and I believe we're going to have 3 more chapters for next week. Thank you guys so much for showing up, and see you guys next week.